Most people think aggression comes from strength, from dominance, from confidence. But psychology reveals something far more uncomfortable. Aggression often begins as insecurity. The loudest voice in the room is not always the most confident. Sometimes it is the most threatened. By the end of this exploration, you will understand why insecurity can transform into anger, hostility, or control, what happens in the brain during that shift, and how this pattern shows up in relationships, workplaces, and everyday interactions. Insecurity is, at its core, a perception of vulnerability. It is the feeling that something about you is insufficient, unstable, or at risk of being exposed. This perception activates the brain's threat system. The amygdala responds quickly. Stress hormones increase. The body prepares for defense. Defense does not always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like attack. When a person feels psychologically threatened, the brain can interpret social cues as danger. A simple disagreement may feel like rejection. Constructive feedback may feel like humiliation. In those moments, aggression becomes a shield. Anger is often easier to access than shame. Shame is heavy. It requires inward reflection. It exposes vulnerability. Anger, on the other hand, feels powerful. It directs attention outward. Instead of feeling small, the person feels dominant. Have you ever noticed how quickly someone can move from embarrassment to hostility? That shift is not random, it is protective. Neuroscience helps explain this. When self-esteem feels threatened, areas linked to social pain activate. The brain experiences status loss similarly to physical discomfort. Aggression can temporarily restore a sense of control. It reduces the internal discomfort by projecting it outward. This is why criticism can trigger disproportionate reactions. The response is not about the comment itself, it's about the identity threat underneath it. Consider workplace dynamics. An insecure manager may micromanage aggressively. They may dismiss others' ideas quickly. They may react defensively to suggestions. On the surface, it looks authoritarian. Underneath, it often reflects fear of being perceived as incompetent. Control becomes compensation. In relationships, insecurity may show up as jealousy-fueled anger. A partner who feels unworthy may accuse, interrogate, or criticize. The aggression masks the fear of abandonment. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid of losing you," they say, "You're disrespecting me." The language shifts. The vulnerability disappears. Pause and reflect. When you feel criticized, what is your first impulse? To understand or to defend? Aggression tied to insecurity is usually reactive, not strategic. It flares quickly. It often feels justified to the person expressing it. In their mind, they're protecting themselves from harm. But here's the surprising insight. The aggression often creates the very rejection they fear. When someone lashes out repeatedly, others withdraw. Trust erodes, distance increases. This confirms the insecure person's belief that they are not safe or valued. The cycle reinforces itself. Social comparison also plays a role. In environments where status is visible, insecurity can intensify. If someone perceives others as more attractive, successful, or admired, their self-concept may feel unstable. Aggression becomes a way to reduce the perceived gap. They may criticize others, undermine achievements, mock strengths. By lowering others, they attempt to raise themselves. The brain's reward system can even reinforce this behavior. When aggression silences a perceived threat, the person feels temporary relief. That relief releases dopamine. The behavior becomes more likely to repeat. But relief is not resolution. Another layer involves identity rigidity. When someone's sense of self is fragile, they may cling tightly to certain roles or beliefs. If those roles are challenged, aggression emerges quickly. It protects the narrative they depend on. This is why debates can become personal so fast. A disagreement about ideas becomes a perceived attack on identity. Have you ever been in a conversation where a minor correction triggered a major outburst? Often, the reaction reveals insecurity rather than disagreement. Childhood experiences can shape this pattern. If a person grew up in environments where mistakes were punished harshly, they may develop hypersensitivity to criticism. Aggression becomes a learned response to avoid feeling small. It is not always conscious. It becomes automatic. There is also a gendered social component. In some cultures, vulnerability is discouraged, especially in men. Expressing fear or inadequacy may feel unacceptable. Anger, however, is often tolerated. It becomes the only socially permitted emotion. In that context, insecurity channels into aggression because there are few other options. But insecurity does not always lead to loud anger. It can manifest as subtle hostility, sarcasm, passive aggression, dismissive tone. These behaviors create distance while preserving a sense of superiority. The underlying emotion remains the same: fear of inadequacy. Here's another surprising truth. Confident individuals are less reactive to criticism. They may feel discomfort, but they do not experience identity collapse. Their self-worth is stable enough to absorb feedback. Aggression is often a sign of instability, not strength. If you observe this pattern in yourself, the key question is not, why am I angry? The deeper question is, what feels threatened right now? Naming the threat reduces its intensity. When you identify the insecurity, you interrupt the automatic escalation. The prefrontal cortex regains influence over the amygdala. Emotional regulation improves. For example, instead of saying, "You're disrespecting me," you might recognize, "I felt ignored." That shift changes the entire interaction. In relationships, responding to insecurity with curiosity rather than counterattack can de-escalate conflict. If someone reacts aggressively, calmly asking what felt hurtful can reveal the vulnerability beneath the anger. However, it's important to maintain boundaries. Understanding insecurity does not mean tolerating harmful behavior. Compassion and accountability can coexist. Consider this reflection. When someone acts aggressively towards you, what if the behavior reveals more about their internal fear than your actual mistake? This perspective does not excuse harm, but it can prevent unnecessary self-blame. The long-term solution to insecurity-driven aggression is self-awareness and emotional tolerance. Learning to sit with feelings of inadequacy without immediately defending against them builds resilience. Confidence grows from accepting imperfection, not denying it. When individuals develop stable self-worth, criticism becomes information rather than threat. Differences become dialogue rather than combat. The nervous system remains regulated. Imagine how many conflicts would dissolve if insecurity were acknowledged openly instead of masked with hostility. The psychology behind aggression reveals something compassionate yet sobering. Beneath many sharp words lies unspoken fear. Beneath many controlling behaviors lies anxiety about losing significance. Recognizing this changes how we interpret human behavior. It invites us to look past volume and into vulnerability. It encourages us to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. If this reflection resonates, consider moments when anger surfaced quickly. Ask what felt exposed. Ask what identity felt challenged. Growth begins not with suppressing aggression, but with understanding its source. Share your thoughts below. Reflect on how insecurity has shaped your own reactions or the reactions of others around you. And continue exploring the psychology behind everyday behavior, because understanding it transforms conflict into insight and defensiveness into self-awareness.